everybody, and welcome back to another installment of You're Missing the Point. I'm Zach back here with you, and we have some great topics to get into today. Going to talk some college basketball, some professional basketball, and some Pirates baseball. So let's get started. First off, Duquesne has decided to hire University of Akron head basketball coach Keith Dambrot to a 7-year contract. Dambrot was also a former high school basketball coach of LeBron James. Dambrot led Akron to be one of the top schools in the MAC, and he also led them to 3 NCAA tournament appearances. Dambrot's father was a former University of Duquesne basketball player, which played a role in his decision to come here. Another reason that he decided to come here was the fact that the university has now decided to commit more money to improving the basketball program and their facilities. In other basketball news, the NBA playoffs are nearing, and the Cleveland Cavaliers find themselves looking over their shoulders. With recent defensive lapses and the team trying to figure out the right rotations with all the players being back, the Cleveland Cavaliers have given up the first place in the Eastern Conference to the Boston Celtics. The Washington Wizards and the Toronto Raptors have also been playing great basketball lately. What was once thought of as an easy route to the NBA Finals, now it's uncertain whether the defending NBA champions will even make it to the NBA Finals this year. That being said, it's not time to panic right now. I mean, you don't want to be playing your best basketball and you don't want to be peaking as a team right now. The NBA playoffs are almost like another season, just like it is for the NHL. So you want to be playing your best basketball at the start of or going into the playoffs. That way you can play your best basketball and hopefully it'll lead you to the NBA Finals, if not a title. Sticking to the topic of basketball, I'd like to go to our great questions that we have in this week's Stick to Sports social media segment. Our first question this week comes from @Nate Sherman. He asks, it's down to 3 people in my March Madness bracket. A wins if South Carolina or Oregon is the champion. B wins if North Carolina is the champion. And C wins if Gonzaga is the champion. Who will win? Well, first off, I'd like to look at the 2 matchups in the Final Four and the 4 teams that are still left. First off, this has been a great run for the University of South Carolina. They made it to their first Final Four, and they beat the 2, 3, and 4 seeds on their way to making it here in Baylor, Duke, and Florida. This team has some great free throw shooters, they play some great defense, and they have some great scorers on their team, and they're going to pose a great threat against Gonzaga. Now, looking at Gonzaga, they're a team that always looked like they were on the brink and they just couldn't get there. Now they finally made it to the Final Four, and Karnowski is maybe one of my favorite players in this tournament. He is a great big man underneath. They are another team that has some great size and some great shooters, so that's going to be a great game to watch. I think both Final Four games are going to go down to the wire. North Carolina is another great team that made the Final Four. They made it to the title game last year, weren't able to get it done at the end, so obviously they're playing with some passion and some fire, trying to make it back and trying to win the championship this year. That being said, they had some close calls in this tournament, and Kentucky almost exposed them for being a little bit slower than they should be in last game, so I think Oregon's going to be a great threat to them. Oregon's another team. Many people had some high hopes for them this year. They lost one of their top players in Chris Boucher to an ACL injury. A lot of people counted them out after that. But, they played some great basketball in this tournament, and they absolutely shut down maybe the hottest team in the tournament in Kansas. Jordan Bell had 8 blocks against Kansas. I think he's going to give North Carolina some fits underneath. So I think the title game's going to be Oregon versus Gonzaga. And I still think that Gonzaga has the upper hand in that, and I'd like to see Mark Few finally get the championship. So my answer to your question, Nate, is C. Gonzaga is going to win the championship this year. Our next question is another question about the Final Four, and @Condev23 asks, do you think South Carolina has a chance of winning the tournament? Well, Connor, like I said, South Carolina had a great run this year. They beat the 2, 3, and 4. That being said, Duke and Baylor were 2 great but inconsistent teams this year. Florida was a great matchup for them, but I still think that Gonzaga is going to be a little bit overwhelming for them underneath. I think Gonzaga is going to take it to them, and this will be South Carolina's final game in the Final Four. Our next question comes from @Jacob Bartis, and he asks, who will lead Pitt football in rushing yards this season? Well, Jake, first you have to look at who's returning and who's coming in. You have Shantez Moss coming back, who had 42 carries for 227 yards last year. You have Kadri Ollison coming back, who had 33 carries for 127 yards last year. And you also have Darren Hall coming back, who had 36 carries for 160 yards last year. Darren Hall, however, is recovering from injury, so Moss and Ollison are the only 2 players they have for spring practices right now. That being said, from what I've read, these guys are both neck and neck. They really like what they've seen from Ollison. They really think that he's back to the form that he played in whenever Connor was out a couple years ago. And, he was a great back during that time. And Moss is also a guy that I really liked watching whenever he was, full go last season. He's really shown some flashes of speed, really shows that he can have some great cuts at the line of scrimmage. Once he hits the hole, he hits it with speed. So, I think both of those guys could be great threats. Though, Jake, you also have to look at who's coming in. And these guys that, they won't see for a few more months now, they have A.J. Davis and Todd Sibley coming in. But both of these guys are two of the top, running back recruits in the nation. These guys have played some great football in high school. They're guys that both show a lot of speed and they both show a lot of great vision. So, I think they could also pose a threat coming into camp. The great thing is it looks like they'll have 4, maybe 5 running backs that are all pretty good, and they know that whoever performs the best is going to get the most carries. So I think it's going to be one of those iron sharpens iron things. You're going to see these guys push themselves to the extremes of what they can do. I think Ollison could possibly be the guy that leads the team in rushing yards this year, especially if he's back to his form that he was in 2 years ago. He could be a dangerous back. So I think my prediction as of now is that he's going to lead the team in rushing yards. So thank you for that question, Jake. Our next question comes from @Jared Polanski, and he asks, do you think Connor McDavid will be better than Sidney Crosby? Well, Jared, as of right now, I think Crosby's the guy that has the upper hand in that. That being said, Connor McDavid's having a great season right now, and Edmonton holds a playoff spot right now, so he's done great things for that franchise. Eventually, I do think he can become better than Sidney Crosby. And you hate to play the game of ifs, Jared, but I think if Crosby wasn't injured in that Winter Classic game against Washington, it would just be crazy to think the stats that he would have right now. But I do think in time, Connor McDavid could potentially become better than Sidney Crosby. But right now, it's all Crosby. Our next question comes from @Charles_Markley, and he asks, what is the most meaningless stat in sports that gets a lot of attention? Well, Mark, I actually believe there's 2 stats that get a lot of attention that I think are kind of meaningless. First would be wins and loss record for pitchers, because that's a little bit of a flawed stat. If you would put that with ERA possibly, I don't think by itself wins and losses is a great stat for a pitcher, because if you have a pitcher that has a great outing and only gives up 1 run, and his team can't manage to score any runs, his team gets shut out, then that goes under a loss for the pitcher. But if the pitcher, only gave up 1 run the entire game and then just had a great game, then, what does a loss mean? Another stat that I really don't think is that important is plus and minus in basketball. It's a stat that's measured the player's team score minus the opponent's team score while they're on the court. So they take one individual player and they take the time that they're on the court and how much their team score. They take how much their team scores and take from that what the opponent scores while they're on the court. What they don't factor into that, though, is the 4 other players that are currently on the court with that player and the 5 players that player is playing against. So I really think that's a flawed stat and also a very meaningless stat in the sport of basketball. I really don't think that really truly measures anything great or bad about players. So thank you for that question, Mark. And our final social media question for the week comes from @Bobby Rendina, and he asks, what is your Pittsburgh Pirates season prediction? How many wins will they have? Who will be the team MVP? And where will they end up in the playoffs? Well, Bobby, thank you for that question. The unfortunate thing is there's a lot of factors that come into this season. The Pirates are still engaged in trade talks, possibly, with the White Sox about Jose Quintana. You really don't know what they would give up. Right now it's looking like you would be giving up at least Austin Meadows and Tyler Glasnow, or at least one of the 2. It's looking like possibly both of them coupled in with 1 or 2 other prospects. So, if the Pirates do get Quintana, that could be great for them. The rotation as is right now, you're looking at Garrett Cole, you're looking at Jameson Taillon, you're looking at Ivan Nova, Chad Kuhl, and, the 5th starter position, which is either going to be Tyler Glasnow or Trevor Williams, it looks like. You don't know what you're going to get out of the rotation this year. The other thing that you don't know is who's going to be the everyday third baseman, or if, third baseman is going to be a collective thing between Freese, probably Josh Harrison, John Jaso. You also have Josh Bell playing over at first, who they said completely doesn't have it down defensively yet. You also don't know what you're going to get with that bat. You're also looking to see what McCutchen and Harrison do this year. So my guess right now would be that Josh Bell's going to be at first. Adam Frazier is going to be at second and bat leadoff. I think at least that's what it looks like they're showing. I think possibly, I would like to see Freese start at third and Harrison come off the bench possibly to start the season, just to see how that would go. That being said, it looks like Harrison might be the starting third baseman. So, I mean, if they keep the team that they have right now, they don't add any major pieces at the trade deadline, or they don't make that trade with the White Sox for Quintana. So the way I look at it is, worst case scenario, they're probably going to be a low to mid 80s win team, just going to miss out on the playoffs. Best case scenario, they finish with a handful more wins and they make it to the wild card. And I do think that they have a solid top three in their rotation. I do think, obviously, if they were to acquire someone like Quintana, that makes you pretty solid 4 deep in your rotation. But that being said, if they make a wild card game this year, I would like their chances in that. So best case scenario, they probably make it to the divisional round. I honestly really don't know what to expect from the team this year. As far as team MVP goes, I'm going to go with McCutchen for team MVP this year. I'm hoping and I'm thinking that he's going to return back to his great form, and he has some great years of baseball left in him. So, I'm going to go with McCutchen for team MVP this year. Thank you for that question, Bobby. Well, everyone, that about does it for this week. Thank you very much for tuning in, and see you next week. Today's show is brought to you by Shaw's Bait Company. For more information, please visit their Facebook page.